Cam Thomas took the qualifying offer, and that got me thinking, what is Cam Thomas's game really? Is he someone that's going to play his way into a big contract this year with the Nets? And I came to a slightly different conclusion than I expected to, but let's break down his game. And I don't really think many people watched the Nets last year very deep, myself included, aside from like my guy Lucas Kaplan. But if you're excited for this breakdown, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Cam Thomas has legitimately gotten better, and I think he is a legitimately great and impactful offensive player and would be on a good team. And I feel pretty confident saying that, honestly. But obviously on the Nets, he's a crazy high usage player, and his shot making is insane. It always has been, but he's taking more and more pull-up and step-back threes this year. Clutch shot right there. And he's had great success because he is just a nutty all-time shot-making talent who can pump fake, pretty much score and shoot off of any platform. But he's up to his three-point volume this year. And yeah, just traded some of those long mid-ranges for pull-up threes, which of course is just more efficient long-term. We know this, even if it lowers the just raw field goal percentage, and of course it has latent spacing value too. This is a fun, all-encompassing Cam Thomas play. Decent little pass right there. He's going to try driving into traffic. He's going to lose the ball on the pump fake. He's going to get the ball back, and oh my goodness, I remember when this shot happened. He just has that rare like shot-making gene that is really undeniable. But like the NBA is fading these like one-way microwave scoring guards. But I do think Thomas is a bit more is probably a bit more than that on offense. He's a nice off-ball player, which I think people kind of don't really give him credit for. And part of it is Jordi Fernandez, who used him really well. But he can like shake a defender, step back behind the line, and he's so good at shooting over contests that even though he's not always as decisive as I wish he was, it doesn't necessarily matter as much as it does for some other players. And he is really relentless just getting to his spots. He'll bump and bump and bump and keep his dribble alive until he can get to that mid-range spot that he wants to. He's really good now at taking these forward momentum pull-up threes where the defense is obviously going over Cam Thomas. You can't go under Cam Thomas. He is going to pull. But Peyton Pritchard, right, like trying to chase over the screen, gets stuck, and Thomas is going to hop forward and pull, and he loves his step back. I feel like he's kind of more known for that, but he's really good at the forward momentum. Sometimes he can just get a little shot happy. He's going to isolate against a good defender in Sam Hauser, just take a tough three, and his decision-making is a major issue. Again, how much of it is just the team context, but it is worth noting that I'm just not crazy about the shot selection. But again, then Cam Thomas is going to fade away. Hit crazy moon balls like that. And you can kind of understand where that like general mentality comes from. Another clutch shot right here. He's an excellent mid-range shot maker. That's kind of always been his thing, right? The tough mid-range bucket getting. And he's so good with his footwork, pump fakes, getting these shots off balance against Christian Braun right there. As like a clutch isolation scorer, he definitely did some good things for the Nets this year just because of his really impressive tough shot making. But I think, like I said, kind of an underrated off-ball player. I love this little give and go to get to his spot at the left elbow, rises up and hits a mid-range shot. And his profile is really interesting, but which we'll get to later. But Cam Thomas is gonna come around this little like gut pistol action right here. Ball screen or down screen into a handoff. He gets going, and Cam isn't like the quickest player in the world or the best just standstill advantage creator, right? He relies mostly on tough shot making, but he has certainly gotten better at it, and man, his strength is really impressive. His handle has absolutely improved over the last couple years, and look at him going against Aaron Gordon. He's going to cross over here and just kind of wedge himself under Aaron Gordon. This is like not a good route for Aaron Gordon either, but he wedges himself under him, strong, takes a 1-2 step right there and finishes. So yeah, Cam is a very, very impressive scorer. There is no denying that. And I love him as a closeout attacker too because of how deep he forces players to close out. Like Cam Thomas is spotting up at the hash mark, but Aaron Gordon respects his shooting threat because Cam will pull from there. And that just gives him so much space to get into, and he leans into a beautiful floater. That's going to be an and one. And I think this is going to set him up well when he's playing next to better players. Hopefully, certainly not this year, but maybe in the future, right? One can dream. And these like dribble handoffs, the early motion to get him into space is really good for Cam. And like I said, huge shout out to Jordi Fernandez. I know there's like basic zoom right here. Aaron Gordon switches on to him. Great little hesitation. Thomas is a great finisher too, so he goes with that wrong foot, right foot jump, right hand scoop. He's so crafty and skilled. And like I said, I do think the off-ball game is definitely a plus for him. But he is just such an incredible intermediate creator. I do like him trading more long mid-range shots for short mid-range shots. As we can say, 3 long mid-range shots this year, by far the lowest of his career, and 3.9 rim attempts, the most of his career, 9.5 threes at 35% with a lot of pull-ups. That is a very, very impressive shooting profile, and not a super low amount of assisted threes as well when we consider all of the volume. And like the impact metrics view him as a good player overall because of crazy offense, and that offense is fueled by just like the volume scoring. There aren't a lot of players who are taking more shots than Cam Thomas, like 6th in the league in true shot attempts, and his efficiency being just a point above league average is really, really impressive, right? Like LaMelo and Paolo and Embiid briefly, and Franz and Mitchell and Cade and Ja, like these guys are all below league average shooting on fewer shots than Cam, and I do think that just speaks to the level of pure scoring talent he is. And a lot of this fueled by a free throw shooting jump. Like, look at this foul drawing improvement from really good to 9.8 per 100. Like, that puts him up with in the top 10 among all positions. The only guards who drew more fouls were Harden, Luka Doncic, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So, like, an undeniably great offensive player at this point. And I do think he really could impact winning at this point with more, like, experience playing off of the ball and next to better teammates. Because, like we said, he can come off of handoffs, curl towards the middle, and then use his strength and his craft and the pump fake, the up fake to get into that little mid-range jumper. That is something we see him doing. And we're going to look at like some of his time of possession and play type stuff in a little bit, but he's a great snaker of the pick and roll. He doesn't want to go at Donovan Clingan, rightfully so he's just going to snake back to the left side and make sure Shaedon Sharpe is the defender he has to go over, which is obviously a much weaker defender. Cam Thomas is going to flex right there. We're going to see another nice like give and go right here. I like that the Nets had passing bigs like Claxton and Day'Ron Sharpe, where I don't think Thomas is as good at just, using his burst or handle to create an advantage against a wing, but he is good at shaking off the ball and using his shooting threat to create those little advantages. Whew, it's a beautiful Euro step. Oh my goodness. So yeah, Thomas, I think these are the kind of plays that fit in well in good teams. And again, Jordi Fernandez is doing cool stuff right here. We have like a high double screen here with Keon Johnson on the ball. Cam Thomas dribble handoff keeper to the rim. Doesn't end up finishing, but like that is a really cool action. They use him as like a post hub at times, and Thomas is just like a seasoned foul drawer. I do wonder like how his foul drawing translates to the playoffs, because some of this like pump fakes into the defender and like some of the grifty foul drawing does go away, and I do think his free throw attempts got a little lower in the clutch. They're still great, but you do see moments, right, where defenders are just not biting at his pump fakes, and I think especially in the playoffs against high-level defenses, that could be an issue. But as we saw, another reason his efficiency isn't better is just because his finishing is never probably going to be great. He's not a great vertical athlete, as we can see Christian Brown pretty easily goes in there, but he is a very aggressive finisher. Like, he's always looking to go up and draw fouls, so that's probably going to deflate his percentages a bit. And I think he could pick his spots a little better as a driver. I'd love to see him keep his dribble alive and try to attack Jokic on a mismatch here. Instead, he settles for a tough fadeaway pretty early in the clock, which, again, is a makeable shot for Cam Thomas. I understand why he takes it, but I do think when we're talking about, again, the whole central question of this video is, can Cam Thomas contribute to winning playoff basketball when he's not just chucking shots on a bad team? But I don't think he's really even suited to that role because of his advantage creation. Like we said, against Jason Tatum, he can't get much of an advantage, settles for a really tough floater that, again, that's a makeable shot for Cam Thomas, but it's a tough way to live, and I think when he doesn't have like the off-ball advantages, that can be the issue. Like, he's going against Chris Murray, who's like an all right wing defender, but doesn't have the craziest explosiveness, and he can't get any lift at the rim, and he's forced to take a really tough shot. So that is something I do worry about with Cam Thomas at the highest level against the best defenses. Just the combination of some of the reckless decision making and shot selection with like the physical finishing limitations. And his turnovers are pretty high as well, even though I don't believe they're as bad as they once were. Thomas can really struggle against pressure. I just don't know if he has great awareness, right? He can dribble himself and just kind of not seem to be calm and poised under pressure. Like here in the late game, Pelicans are gonna blitz him. He has Claxton open, but he's just gonna pivot and try to throw a lazy pass, and it gets intercepted. So there are definitely still areas that he needs to improve on as a playmaker. And yeah, like I said, he is just like very confident going downhill towards the paint. I love his aggressive mentality, but it can get him into trouble sometimes, just like drawing contacts. And when he doesn't get those foul calls, it can definitely be rough. But I do think Thomas has improved as a passer, and the numbers reflect that right here. His potential assists per 100, first time above 10, 67th percentile. Most rim assists, which I think is definitely reflected in the tape, despite not being on ball a crazy amount. We're going to talk about a chart later, but he's getting better at just like switching on to Aaron Gordon, pivoting. There's nowhere to go. I'm just going to kick it out to Cam Johnson instead of forcing a really difficult shot. He's making more of these basic shots, and Cam Thomas is a good passer off of these like 2-foot hops where he loves to pick the ball up and pump fake and get to his shots anyways, but he's getting better at just like reading the court, seeing the double team, and hitting the cutter. This is definitely an area of progression for him over this year and the last year. And it's really good to see him making these decisions on the fly where, yeah, it's nothing crazy. And I don't think Cam Thomas is ever going to be a special passer, but these are really good flashes. And this Bulls game, I think this was the last game he played, he looked incredible in this game. Had a bunch of really impressive passes, laid down on the drive right here. Just good job reading Kobe White stepping up, hitting the interior pass. Shout out Zaire Williams, who I loved as a prospect, and definitely is not as good as I once hoped he was, but he's probably not as great of a prospect as I really kind of wanted him to be. But Thomas is a pretty good lob thrower. He'll often just like lob it up to his bigs and hope it works out. And Sharp and Claxton are both pretty good lob catchers, so it often did work out for Thomas. But the thing that stands out to me here is, again, like the late audible right here. It looks like he's going up for the shot. That's obviously what Jarrett Allen is thinking, but then he changes his mind, just lobs it up to Claxton. So this kind of like creativity and late drive playmaking, and again, he's best when he can survey off of two. Really great interior pass right there. It's promising. There is something here, and even though the sample of this is pretty small, like these are really impressive plays of Thomas live reading the floor. This is a great pass on the move, reading the Vooch help. He knows there's flat spacing, right? Everyone's on the baseline except for Claxton, so that means there's going to be a void. He can pass into it, and yes, this is the Bulls defense in March, but it's still great to see this kind of progress from Cam Thomas to hope that he can kind of develop into a more competent passer in the long term. Again, this one is so beautiful. Again, snaking to the middle of the floor. By the way, happy retirement, Nikola Vucevic. Just wrapping the ball, bouncing it to Claxton. So there's some real impressive deliveries and good moments that we saw from Cam Thomas as a playmaker. Another good closeout attack. And of course, he's a shooting threat. Kobe White has to pay attention to him. And then he just calmly, patiently hits D'Angelo Russell. Again, really poor defense by the Bulls there. But still, impressive vision by Thomas, and it's good to see even some kinds of improvements. I don't think he's ever going to be like great processing the ball. I love this off-ball shake, and I wish he just ball was out now, but he has to take this dribble, hop off 2 feet, and then make the pass where this is a more contested shot. But there's at least some marginal improvement that I think could help him fit next to other teammates. But the other big elephant in the room, which I haven't mentioned yet because I'm going to mention now, is the defense, which is one of the worst in the league, I think, pretty clearly. Thomas, just watch this possession. He gets back up by Draymond Green. He gets beat on the closeout. He's just kind of standing right there. He lets Steph Curry drive into his airspace, and he fouls him for no reason at the end. Like, his motor and activity level are very poor, and this is definitely the biggest obstacle to him playing winning basketball. And he gets the steal here, but so many times you'll see Cam Thomas just not really knowing what's happening. This is an incredible pass by Brunson, by the way, and he's lucky that he did not see Hart cutting in front of him, and he's lucky that pass was off. But again, great play by Brunson there. Cam Thomas getting back in transition, you never really see him sprinting, and there's Buddy Hield he has to close out. Instead of trying to run off the line, he just kind of walks over there. His conditioning and effort, and obviously he was injured a lot this season. He didn't play a ton, and that's of course unfortunate. But the effort defending the ball and defending off the ball, it's pretty dire. It's not good. And like, maybe he's not the worst defender in the league because he has some positive qualities, which we'll get into. But the amount of like late rotations and mistimed tags and where he's not paying attention in transition, I think I actually showed this clip twice. But I think this is the biggest reason to me that like it's hard to really trust him as a high-level winning player, even with how good he is on offense. We're going to see right here, once he sees Tatum catches the ball, he just stops defending the screen. Like, what if this is, Jokic, and he whoops it over there? But that is just not a great omen to me. And you see, again, when Cam actually has to defend a screen, it doesn't go well. He doesn't have super quick feet. He's not super agile, changing directions in short spaces. And he gave up a lot of shots when teams made him chase over. The Nets often just, like, stationed Cam on, like, the weakest defender. But when there were better players switched on to him, like, his lack of physicality is kind of disappointing because he is strong. And we'll see that in some instances. But, like, really, Jaylen Brown has no issue just wedging him out. And obviously, it's Jaylen Brown. No, not necessarily too harsh. But we're going to see a similar thing happen right here with Gershon Yabusele. The Nets are going to switch right here. They switched pretty often. And he just, like, walks him back. And it's not necessarily that he gets scored on here. It's that there's just no resistance letting Yabu walk him into the restricted area. Cam, doesn't really even make an attempt at the pass on the ball. Like, it's just not really great at all. And some of the decisions he's making, right? He's guarding OG Anunoby. He's just floating over to help on Towns when Ben Simmons is totally in front of him, and then Anunoby cuts and he ends up getting a layup. Like, I don't know. I'm just trying to explain why I think he is not that highly valued of a player. Like, it is really hard to play players at like high level basketball who just don't try that hard. And I think you can definitely argue that like on a better team his motor could be higher, and he's had better defensive seasons in the past, but he's still always been limited. There are some good moments from Cam Thomas where he does a good job reading this pass before it happens, just gets a little unlucky and misses at the swipe. Goga ends up finishing, but that was a pretty solid read by Cam Thomas. And some of the best stuff from him comes on defense, like at the basket. He guarded the rim a lot because the Nets would often like station him on a weak offensive player or one of the weaker offensive players and have him be low man, and he could use his size and length and strength to make some contests. And when you put him on weak scores, he can, like I said, use that strength, use his body to keep Draymond Green away from the rim. So you can imagine ways like he can use the strength and some of the physical tools to contribute on defense. And I do think there's a path for that, even if I'm not like crazy optimistic about it happening. Great block there on Kevin Huerter. But for every great, point of attack defense flash this year, there were 2, 3, 4, 5 clips of him just kind of getting blown by. I don't think I meant to have this seal in here twice. My bad. But yeah, it was just like they were hunting him. And like we said, they had him guarding Josh Hart on the perimeter. They run a Brunson ball screen, and he just kind of lets Josh Hart get into his spin move. The amount, just like pay attention to the players who Cam Thomas is guarding on a lot of these plays, but he is just like not a good defender in space, unfortunately, and the injuries have probably contributed to some of his foot speed, right? I know he was like playing on heavier weight, I think, for parts of the season, but teams definitely hunted him when he was on the floor. You can see them bringing in Doug McDermott. He's guarding Doug McDermott because that's just like an off-ball player, right? So De'Aaron Fox brings up McDermott. You have Cam Thomas and like a peel switch onto the screen. And he just doesn't have the speed to hang with Fox. And of course he decelerates and easily gets into his floater. The speed and the change of direction for Cam Thomas are definite like athletic issues on the defensive end. And yeah, like in big moments, 41 seconds, up 3 points. Damian Lillard coming at Cam Thomas at the perimeter, and he just kind of lets him walk by to the rim. Like, I know you're not trying to foul or give up a three, but still, like, it's not the right time to just stand there and get blown by without trying at all. Ryan Rollins here, Thomas reaches pretty often when he's not in good position. That's going to get him burned, and Rollins gets all the way to the rim pretty easily. Defense is about so many like second and third efforts. Great offenses have counters built in when you stop their first effort, and you rarely see that from Thomas, unfortunately. Like sometimes he'll make a good play initially. Like he sticks with Chris Murray on this drive right now, but a great job. Like he's not sliding right, he turns and chases, so his momentum is carrying him this way. Murray stops on a dime and he can't stop quickly enough, but then he just like doesn't try to get back into play. He stands there and lets Chris Murray, and Chris Murray isn't a great offensive player, but he is a professional basketball player, right? And yeah, Cam Thomas is struggling to make an impact defending the perimeter. So I do really want to see improved defense from Thomas this year. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for me to get to a point where I feel comfortable like paying him real money to be a key rotation piece. And like he's such a unique player. I posted this graph on Twitter today that I made. On the x-axis we have higher on-ball rates, so more on-ball, and then up here we have more passing volume, just potential assists per 100. So you see Trey is the highest, but Cam Thomas is kind of an outlier here. He doesn't spend that much time on the ball, but his bubble is very big, a lot of shot attempts, and most of the guys with bubbles as big as him, Zion, Shea, James Harden, LaMelo Ball, like they're on the ball much more and they pass more. So Thomas is like very unique in how he gets his offense too. And I think there's potential for that to work really well next to other good players because he is an excellent shooter off the catch. He's made strides as a passer and an off-ball player. His shot profile is better than it was, but it's not going to be an easy transition. It's going to be like we pretty much only see Thomas add a ton of value on offense by being a super helio on-ball player, not necessarily in terms of time spent on the ball, but usage and getting shots in whatever spots that they are, whether it's isos or pick and rolls or just those zooms and handoffs and stuff. But I think Thomas is maybe a little underrated by some people. I think he could be a really solid rotation piece on the right team just with his offense alone. Like he's a ridiculous offensive player. If you can get him to a really good defensive team like, I don't know, Orlando, Houston, teams that could use his scoring pop, I think there's potential here. But it's going to be a really big season for him, right? Staying healthy, proving that he can consistently impact on defense, and it's going to be a tough year for the Nets, but it's a big year for Cam Thomas, and I'm really curious to see what people think about him. He's obviously a very polarizing player. My view on him is, again, still not, probably closer to the view of not wanting to pay him a ton of money, but I'm open to the idea of changing my mind because he is a very special offensive talent, and there are feasible ways that he could work, and we're already seeing it with how the Nets use him. So I'm rambling anyways. Love you all if you watch this. I really appreciate y'all so much.